And welcome back to the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and we're talking today to Dale Berg. He is a radio personality in Los Angeles as well as Riverside, all over Southern California. And last time, Dale, we were talking about a small station in Riverside, San Bernardino, that was 80 watts and bad management that you didn't have to deal with for too long. I remember talking with a DJ years ago. I'm not going to mention the name because I didn't get permission to mention this, but it was a big DJ here in Los Angeles. And during his heyday, one of his big stations, in fact, the biggest station he was ever on, the highest ratings, that was not his favorite time in radio because the program director would always cuss him out even while he was on the air. Even though he had the number one show in afternoon drive, had 1/3 of the audience, that was not his favorite time in radio. So it sounds kind of like that, except this one, you didn't have to deal with it for 4 years. You only had to deal with it for about 5 weeks. After 92.7, where did you go after that? Was it KYMS Radio, the Christian music station?
Yeah, not right yet. Okay. Well, kind of at the same time. What happened was I got a call from Pat Michaels, and he said, and actually it was like his secretary that called me. And she said, Pat realizes that he made a mistake when he let you go for KQH. And I said, because he says he realized that I really wasn't the music director, that the program director was the one who was fighting him. And he said he really would like to meet with you. I said, okay, fine. So I had an interview with Pat, and Pat hired me back, but he hired me back for their AM station, which was KWRM 1370 in Corona. And he had adopted it was an AC format, but it was called All Game Radio. And so what we did was we played games with the listeners. And then they'd win these little prizes and things like that. And there was a fun little story about that where I was playing this easiest, simple game that there was. The engineers had taken out the modulation monitor the night before, so I was just listening to the board. And nobody was playing my game, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Found out that the listeners were having a hard time hearing me because the transmitter went off. So that was kind of fun. But now I have to go back to when I was fresh out of college, or I was actually in college. One of the radio stations that I went to and dropped off a tape and a resume, and by the way, it was my homemade tape from my pirate radio station, was KYMS. And I would meet with Arnie McClatchy, and he was always the kindest man that I have ever met in my life. He would invite me into his office, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is a guy that was a general manager. He's a general manager. He was a program director at KZY, sitting in his office. He'd listen to my tapes, and one thing he said to me, he says, have you learned how to, do you know how to scope tapes? And I said, what? I had no idea. So, I mean, I was playing these songs all the way through, and stuff, but he was very kind, and he told me, he said, when I have a position open, I'll give you a call. And I said, okay. So I kept calling him. And I would say this was probably around 1976, 77 when I would visit. Mm-hmm. And so what I didn't realize was that he lived in Anaheim Hills, and he would catch my show. He would catch my show on KTLH and all that. And he figured, hey, he sounds pretty good. And so as soon as I got this job at KWRM, I get a call from Arnie. And there's that phone call. Hi, it's Arnie. I was wondering if you wanted to come to work here. And I said, yeah, I sure do. So I drove down to their station, which at this point they had moved to new studios in Orange. And I met with Dave Spiker. Mm-hmm. And he hired me, and I started off doing 12 noon to 6 p.m. on Saturday. Still, playing records, and although they did start to go to colors. And, oh man, I was in heaven. brand new studio, state of the art. I mean, it was incredible. I'm like pinching myself. I cannot believe that I'm there. I mean, I finally made it. And then during the week, I was doing 7 to midnight at KWRM in Corona. And what happens a lot of times in radio is that you can get kind of confused at what radio station you're looking for. So you may say the wrong call letters.
Oh no.
But I had no problem because the studios at KWRM were just so different and so bad that, I mean, I knew exactly where I was. So that worked out pretty well. That was actually from August 1981 until October. And then I got a call from Dave Spiker, and he says, I'd like for you to come in and we can talk about full-time employment. And I just couldn't believe it. So I went and met with him, and I thought, well, they're going to put me on the evening shift or overnights or something. Oh, no, afternoon drive. 12 noon to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. And so I gave my notice at KWRM, and I quit my job there. And then for, I would say, probably about 3 years I was working. The first time I was working at KWRM.
In fact, Arnie McClatchy, looking at his history, he before that was in charge of KEZY, changing the AM 1190 to the Mighty 1190 from an easy listening format. And so he was definitely a pioneer in Orange County radio, and she got to work with right there. What other memories do you have of Arnie McClatchy, just out of curiosity? Because he sounded like a really, really nice person and just, really bright and just, a great pioneer.
Well, the thing that really kind of surprised me was that he would come in on a Saturday when I was doing my shift and, was doing some work or whatever in the office. And, he would always pop in the control room and we would just chit-chat about anything and about everything. And again, I realized, I respect this man, but he also respects me. And it was just so nice. He treated everybody there really well, and treated everybody like professionals, no matter, where you were at the radio station or anything like that. And so we had a really, really great relationship. It was just heartbreaking when he left, and that was his decision.
Wow!
And it was a situation where they had a situation where the owners of the company, which was Southwestern Broadcasters, they had threatened to change the format of the station and this and that and the other. And so he got together with some people and decided to buy the radio station. I won't mention their names, but so they bought 3 radio stations. They bought KYMS, they bought KRDS in Arizona, and KBRN in Brighton, Colorado. And so his idea at that point was that this is great. The stations are going to stay Christian. They're now owned by a Christian organization, so everything's going to go great. But what he didn't realize was that one of the partners wanted to do something entirely different. And that's where all of these changes started happening at KYMS. We really had good ratings. Everything was fine. Now, it was quite interesting because Dave Spiker had moved off into production. I was doing the afternoon show. But he missed being on the radio. And so he says, I really want to do a shift. I want to do 3 hours. So you do 3 hours and I do 3 hours. And so this was great for me because I got to also learn production. In fact, I was the only person other than himself to record music on cartridges.
Mm.
And there was a real quality assurance about the station, and you had to watch the meters and make sure that it didn't go too much in the red and things like that. And so it was just top-notch quality on the radio. So I did from noon until 3, and he did 3 until 6. And I did a prayer time at 2:25. Wasn't thrilled about praying on the radio, but I figured, okay, well, I might as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really kind of funny, too, especially when radio people from the outside, they would always pop in the radio station right in the middle of my prayer time. I'm thinking, oh, great. But, yeah, so Arnie was fired. And he's like, you can't fire your partner. So anyway, they ended up in a court case and things like that.
Mm.
And then he moved on and moved on to Arizona and had a radio station. No, not Arizona, Texas, and had a radio station there. And so it worked out really well for him in El Paso, and he basically just did exactly the same thing that he had done at KYMS. And let's see. Yeah, and then there was all kinds of different changes and management changes and things like that.
Mm. Now, when you worked at KYMS, what was the music mix? Was it adult contemporary, hot AC, CHR?
Well, we were definitely soft AC.
Mm-hmm.
The reason Arnie decided that the best thing to do was to have kind of a middle-of-the-road format, because in that way you would garner as many listeners as you possibly could. It kind of angered a lot of people. They were not really happy about that, the younger jocks that worked there. He had a scale, and it would go from 1.5. Now, this would be like for the intensity of the song.
Mm-hmm.
1.5 until 5. Okay. Now, the 5 song would only be played in the 9 p.m. number.
Mm.
Everything else was like usually right around a 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, that kind of thing. If we got a 4 song, we were really happy about that. So there was no, hard rock. And in fact, there was a song that came out by an artist called Brown Bannister.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was we had to actually cut the guitar riff out of the song. And so Dave Spiker did that, and you had absolutely no idea where the splice was. It was just amazing.
Mm.
So, because we just couldn't really get into that guitar riff. So that was, yeah. But I would say that the radio station, a lot of people there felt that we should expand and do more and things like that. And so when Arnie was gone and it appeared that that's what might happen, it really didn't, because they brought in a gentleman who had worked with Arnie before at the radio station. His name was John Boyd.
Mm-hmm.
And John Boyd had his own format, very, very similar to Arnie's format. And we had computer sheets just like Arnie had. And it was basically, you didn't even know there was a difference. It just pretty much stayed the same. It wasn't until John Boyd parted ways
Mm-hmm.
with the owners that they hired this man, his name was Jack, from Seattle, Washington, to come in there and be the general manager. And then he brought in his own program director, his name was Greg Fast, and started doing a morning show. And then my demise came after that, basically because, who knows? It's radio.
Yeah.
What can I tell you? they basically told me that I could either do the overnight shift or I could walk. And since I was a newlywed at the time, I said, okay, I guess I'm going to walk. And so at that time, right after that is when they started leaning towards the top 40 and got out of the middle of the road type thing.
Hmm. Now, who were some DJs that you got to work with at that time at KYMS? I remember there was somebody named Jimmy Hodson who also announced on TBN's one-way game show that local Christian schools used to compete on. That's one personality I remember. Anybody else besides Hodson or Dave Spiker that you remember there well?
Yes. We had quite a few people that came through, but a lot of them, there wasn't really many, but there were some that moved on to other places. Like, for instance, I'm thinking off the top of my head, we had Stan Unruh, who was there, who moved on to KYMS radio, that kind of thing. I met Jim Hodson when he first started working there, and I was just thinking to myself, who is this guy? This tall, skinny kid, and, he's in the control room. They put him on the radio and stuff, and he's kind of laughing and everything. And I watched him basically just go from that to becoming a voiceover person and all that. And he's done very well with his career. We also had somebody that really wasn't on the programming side. He was on the sales side.
Mm-hmm.
And his name was Scott Rummel. Scott Rummel would come in and play around in the production room and start doing a bunch of production and read commercial copy and stuff like that. And the program director at the time, his name was Jim, he went into the production room and told him, he says, give it up, Scott. Just stick to sales. You're good at sales and everything. Just forget this production stuff. Okay. Well, Scott Rummel went on to become a very major voice in the voiceover world, and he was doing commercials for Lucky's Supermarkets when they used to be around.
Oh yeah.
He also does movie trailers. He was a voice for many years on ABC TV. Just an incredible career for him, and lots and lots of money. A lot more than I would have had.
Good thing you didn't listen to the program director there. I've heard so many stories about that. Like a couple of years ago, I was writing a book about Jack Barry, and when he first got into broadcasting, he took a summer course at Northwestern University that NBC Radio was putting on. And after taking the summer course, the guy there said, "You know what? Broadcasting is not for you. You just don't have the voice." And so after Jack's juvenile jury got on the cover of either Time or Life magazine, he autographed the magazine, wrote the guy and said, "I'm so glad I did not take your advice."
Right, yeah. Well, see what happened this one day, I got a visit from Scott. And the last time I had seen him, he was in a shirt and tie and a suit and everything. Here he is all scruffy and unshaven and that sort of thing. And he told me, he said that that incident that happened is what inspired him and made him want to do it all more. And then what ended up happening was that he and Jim Hodson got together and they created their own ad agency and that sort of thing. And it kind of took off from there for both of them.
Wow.
So, and then later on, when I wasn't there anymore, they had started, they started this little experiment where they were going to become like a satellite format. And so they hired a lot of LA radio jocks there. And I can't remember the name of most of them anyway, but yeah, they would hire them. And, sounded really good. They spent a lot of money on that, and it just didn't take off like they wanted it to. So, but
kind of like an Air One experiment ahead of its time, because I remember K-Lord became Air One, and for a while they even hired some secular DJs. Like I remember Banana Joe Montillon was on Air One for a while.
Yes, and okay, now I do remember there was Don Carson.
Oh yeah,
I knew I was in this. Don Carson. He was working for K-Lord, and then he was also on the air over there at KYMS. Yeah, and so yeah, it was just a quite interesting thing, and yeah. So then after that I went over to KBRT,
mm-hmm.
and I was hired on as a master producer, and that was a real baptism of fire. And I was told by the guy that I was replacing that it probably wasn't going to work out too well for me. Well, he was right. There were just things that you had to do that just very, it was kind of a lot more than what I had worked up to at that point in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And so it lasted about 3 months. I did enjoy doing an on-air show after Talk from the Heart.
Mm-hmm.
That was really cool to be able to be on, like that, playing music and stuff. And then I don't know, I went to Newport Beach and I started working for KOCM, 103.1, Orange County Music, beautiful music station.
Oh yeah.
And
this is the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs. We're talking with Dale Berg, and he's been talking about his career at KYMS and for a brief moment at KBRT, which I think was talked by that point after it had been Christian music for about 2 years with some secular DJs. And next time we're going to talk about his time at KOCM K-Ocean, which also had a sister station that had a similar name, but it was we'll find out more about that next time.